Aloha and welcome to Island Connections, sponsored by the Department of Ethnic Studies and Information Technology Services at the University of Hawai'i. And tonight we will be talking about housing issues in Hawaii. And the name of the show will be Tenants on the Move. We're trying to do organizing for tenants in public housing and beyond public housing as well. I am Ibrahim Aoude, your host for this evening. And we have with us the studios three social activists who have a wealth of experience in housing organizing in Hawaii. And they are Joy Wong from People Against Chinatown Eviction. And we have Denise DeVoe. She's an organizer with the Housing Alliance and Housing and Homeless Alliance. And we have also Dahlia Asuega. She's she's the president, in fact, of Palolo Tenants Association and Island Tenants on the Rise, which is a statewide organization of tenants in public housing. So we will be talking about those kinds of issues that they face in terms of public housing. But before we do this, I'd like to take this opportunity and talk a little bit about the Department of Ethnic Studies and the courses that we offer at the department and the kind of research that we do as well. So here we have the curriculum, part of the curriculum, we have it, will be shown here. And some of the courses that we have, like Introduction to Ethnic Studies, and then we have courses on Hawaiians, on African Americans, on Caucasians in Hawaii, Filipinos in Hawaii, Original Americans, and so forth. And then other courses we have on ethnic identity and economic change and Hawaii's people, Pacific and Asian women in Hawaii, ethnic literature of Hawaii, and so on. This is just to give people an idea about what ethnic studies does in terms of teaching here. And we also have research that we do, and this is just hot off the press, so to speak. Today we received this book. Actually, it's a journal. It's Social Process in Hawaii, volume 40, 2001, and just came out today. Actually, I got it from the UH Press, and it's Public Policy and Globalization in Hawaii and the Social Process. And this has to do with a lot of stuff that we will be talking about, this semester in our classes, and we will be talking about right now in terms of public policy with regard to housing in Hawaii. So these are the kinds of research projects that we have. And in fact, just to show that, we've been doing something on housing in Hawaii, this is from a previous Social Process in Hawaii journal. And the title of it, and that's why I'm showing it, Hawaii, the Housing Crisis and the State's Development Strategy, to show basically how the state's development strategy is responsible about the lack of housing in Hawaii and the condition of housing the condition that housing is in Hawaii at this point. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to bring up. But to give like a context to what we are doing, it's important to have like some historic continuity to the question of tenants on the rise that we will be talking about and the organizing that Dahlia and Denise have been facing. And this is to talk about People Against Chinatown Eviction with Joy Wong. And, I just ask you, Joy, to maybe introduce yourself further if you so wished, and also to give us some background about PACE, People Against Chinatown Eviction, so that we can put things in context here. And I noticed also that we have this one of the brochures that you used to have at PACE to let people know what who PACE is and what they are doing and so forth. Yeah. So if you would like to give us some kind of background on People Against Chinatown Eviction, and we have also some photos.
Sure.
Yeah.
My name is Joy Wong. I'm one of the PACE coordinators. PACE is People Against Chinatown Eviction. PACE is a residents organization in Chinatown that organized back in 1975 because residents there were faced with evictions, as well as being forced to live in substandard housing. And they were being evicted because of urban renewal and gentrification plans by the city government, by the mayor, and private development. A lot of the people that lived in these buildings were on fixed income. They were elderly. They were workers in sugar and pine, stevedores with a real rich history of labor and struggle. And they realized that with the oncoming evictions that they could not accomplish very much on their own. And so they organized into the PACE organization in 1975. But they had seen that with urban renewal back in the 50s, that a lot of people had been removed, and the community was shrinking quite a bit, and we'll see that on a map later. And that basically profits that developers could make with the assistance of city government were pushing them out of their community, destroying their community, and they had no other choice but to stay and fight, and that's what they did. So this was an organization that was a fighting organization for housing.
We have some photos here, stills that we can show. I mean, the kinds of things that, PACE was organizing at that time, yeah? So this is, do you remember this photo?
Yes, these were residents, Louis Madriaga's grandchildren, who lived in the 4A North Hotel Street, and they were being evicted by Robert Jarrell, who was responsible for probably evicting more small businesses and tenants than any individual and corporation in Chinatown.
Yeah. So we're going to go to the next photo here.
Okay, this was a sit-in. The mayor refused to talk to the people of Chinatown or to take any responsibility, even though the city was using its code enforcement to evict residents, and up until that point had never used code enforcement on the private landlords to keep their buildings decent.
So here, what is this photo regarding this demonstration?
This is the 4A hotel residence. What had happened there is Robert Jarrell was trying to get the residents out of the building, and it wasn't working, so he had sent up a demolition crew, some goons, and what they did is they locked the residents in their apartments. They battered all of the plumbing, the sinks, the toilets, cut the electricity, the gas. There's Louis Madriaga. There were 4 tenants and 2 children still remaining, and then had a policeman there to keep the residents out. So we were at that previous one was Robert Jarrell's house. We demonstrated there to say that, we weren't going to allow that to happen.
So the people were demonstrating for the kind of development that was going on, right? That really didn't benefit them, but benefited the developers and so forth, but not the people in Chinatown. That's why Chinatown people were evicted. The state and the developers were trying to evict them, and they were fighting the eviction.
Correct, yeah? Correct.
Okay. So here is another photo, actually. Justice for exploited workers. So there is a relationship between the people who were fighting in Chinatown and the workers' struggles that they were like fighting for.
Definitely,
also. Yeah.
Definitely.
So could you say something about that?
Well, a lot of the residents in Chinatown were retired workers at the time, and a lot of them had been living in Chinatown for anywhere between 20 to 30 years. And they were stevedores, they were retired workers, pine and sugar, and they had helped Hawaii, the success of Hawaii's economy, and all these corporations and banking institutions benefited off the labor of these people. Yet here they were in their retirement years, living in the community that they had known for several decades. Were being pushed out of the community.
Yeah, and we have this photo here that asks this question, redevelopment for whom? I mean, if it's not to benefit the people, then who is it going to benefit, you see? So people were protesting against this kind of development that they see no benefit from it. And then I like this photo because I remember this particular photo because it is a celebration, you know, of victory for Chinatown. Could you say something about that photo?
That was a celebration in Chinatown because we had won an eviction fight, our first eviction victory at the Aloha Hotel. There was an occupation there by the residents and by supporters in the community to fight the eviction until people could be relocated into decent, affordable housing in Chinatown. So it was a rallying point, and it also was a point where people from the community, the broader community, were beginning to understand that the housing struggle in Chinatown was a struggle that faced everybody in the state and in the country.
Yeah. And one other thing, this is, I have this, the organizer, which is the United Public Workers Union, and it was at that point in support of PACE, yeah, in Chinatown. So we can show this picture and say PACE fights back against attack. Yeah, so you had like support from labor unions at the time.
Well, the success that PACE had to do with being able to educate a broad sector of the community. So yeah, we had lots of support from labor, from schools, from university students, from community groups and churches. Yeah.
And we also have actually some slides that are historic, and you know, I'd like to show those slides you know, in a couple of seconds. But I'm just wondering, like Dahlia and Denise, we're talking now about PACE, People Against Chinatown Eviction. And I'm wondering, like, given your current experiences now with regard to organizing and tenants, how do you reflect on what was going on with People Against Chinatown Eviction, and how do you think that would benefit your organizing struggles and so forth? So, Dahlia, would you like to say something about that?
Sure. It looks like the organizing that was done then is similar to the organizing process that's happening today. That education is important and getting people involved with the issues and concerns that affects them directly. And that's basically the tool of organizing in communities. And I also wanted to know a little bit more of, you know, the organizing tactics or strategies that they used past then. It's been about 25 years or almost 25 years ago, compared to the organizing and strategies that we use today in our type of organizing, compared to everybody's busy schedule nowadays compared to before.
Well, I think the success of the Chinatown housing struggle is that it was a political fight, and that we realized that who we were facing was big business. Their only intention, their only need was to make maximum profits. They had no interest at all in cleaning up the slums. They just wanted to destroy the community, to bring in supposedly, quote unquote, more prosperous kinds of businesses and residents. So I think identifying who we were up against and why was really important, and that was how we developed a political fight. We had at this time developers that were making, you know, all of these great, how should I say it? They had all these great offers, you know, by the federal government, you know, outright grants that were tax-free. They were allowed to come in and use public lands. The infrastructure was put in by the taxpayer. And in addition to that, any housing that they did develop that was subsidized, they got the market rents as they went up. So, you know, it was a lot of money that was made by financial institutions, mortgage companies, developers, and all of those people, construction industry. And so the Chinatown people realized that they had to just rely on themselves. And it was people power. And in order to do that, we had to organize not only our community, but the broader community as well.
We have, some slides to show like how Chinatown shrunk from its original area, which included places by Vineyard, right? And all the way beyond River Street as well.
Well, the original Chinatown boundaries went all the way up to School Street.
We can show the slides, yeah? I mean, this is the first slide, I think, is going to happen. So this is the original Chinatown. Now Chinatown is only like from Pauahi to River, right? Yeah.
Actually, between Nu'uanu and River and Nimitz up to Baratania.
Yeah. So it really shrunk from that one that we have.
About a sixth of its size now.
Sixth of the, But there's a few other historic slides that we have, and we just want to show them for, to honor the people who really fought that kind of fight. So here's one, you see how much support, PACE had.
This was a statewide Stop All Evictions rally.
Yeah, it's an old one, but it's important to show, And these are old plantation workers, primarily, yeah?
Yes, these were PACE residents, steering committee members. A lot of them were facing evictions. They were living in buildings that were faced with evictions, yes.
So this is one of the buildings.
It's the 4A North Hotel Street that Robert Jarrell renovated. And that building is still empty today as a commercial space.
Yeah. Here's
Charlie Correa.
blocking an entrance or something.
Yeah, this is Aloha Hotel eviction, and this was the eviction where we were finally able to force the city to recognize that they would have to sit down and talk to the people and negotiate, decent, affordable relocation.
Yeah, I'm just going ahead and see there's been a lot of activities, That's one reason why, well, the main reason why Chinatown was able to have victories, the people in PACE.
And these are samples, of organizing and of a political fight. It's a people's movement.
And the main thing, as you mentioned, I think it's an important thing to say that it was a political struggle. People understood what is at stake, And where are the people given this kind of development, same theme as the other one. And decent housing is a right. And that really brings us to, things that are also happening here. But to show we have some video segments about Chinatown that, what were the fruits of the struggle in Chinatown with regard to buildings that were built for people who did not get evicted because of PACE fighting and because of them organizing in People Against Chinatown Eviction and fighting City Hall and the state and so forth. Yeah, so we can go to the tape, and maybe, Joe, you can comment on the tape as we go along.
So we asked, where did all the people go? Well, the people who fought in Chinatown with the PACE organization did win their housing. They stayed. We didn't lose a single resident that was involved. And here's the River Pauahi. We called it the Teddy Duncan, after Teddy Duncan, who was a very good fighter. This is Komea. This is one of the renovated units. There were a total of almost 800 units that PACE was responsible for either having renovated or new construction. This is quite great. And here's the Pauahi elderly housing.
So these are some of the, concrete evidence of success, with regard to people fighting in their own interests.
It's interesting, Ibrahim, because ACORN, which is a national housing organization based in Washington, D.C., and does a lot of research on housing struggles, has recognized PACE as one of the few tenants organizations that was truly victorious in that nobody was forced out of the community that was involved in this struggle. And in fact, we built additional housing to bring in new people that needed low-income housing, wanted to have the benefits of living downtown and in Chinatown.
And you know, in the 80s, we have also like the victory celebration, and I want to show something on the this kind of flyer here on the Elmo. I want to show it first, and this is important because it talks about Smith Britannia parking lot, you know, and the groundbreaking ceremonies to build a Smith Britannia apartments unit, which is low-income housing.
It was 163 units.
Yeah. So we also have like some video segments about that Smith Britannia apartments. And if the tape is ready, we can roll the tape, and like Joy would tell us something about that too.
Well, you know, the Smith Britannia apartments was a struggle that went on for almost 6 years. During Reaganomics, it was taken off it was the budget, and then we had to fight for the money to get the building built, and then they wanted to change it to market condominiums, and we fought to make it all Section 8. So we were also involved in the planning of what those apartments would look like, and it was truly a community effort, but it was a big struggle to keep the issue alive and get it built. And
yeah, so that's the kind of thing that, you know, the victories that have been won because of PACE. And this is a good transition point, it seems to me, to what's really going on now with regard to island tenants on the rise. And you might, Dahlia, you might want to say more about that in terms of when it was established, island tenants of the rise, and what you folks do to organize people and so forth. So,
okay, for Island Tenants on the Rise, it's a statewide coalition of public housing residents, supporters, as well as other subsidized residents that came together to create a foundation and network. It started in 1997, and the first meeting that we had was at Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center, where about 6 to 8 presidents from different associations of public housing came together to try and form a coalition to resolve the problems and issues of public housing, and be part or give input to the housing authority of how we could work together to resolve the problems, and not being stats or statistics of problems, but, you know, part of the solutions as well. And that's pretty much how Island Tenants started. And from then on, we've been meeting on a regular basis. We meet every month. We've gone to the outer islands, such as Kauai, Maui, Molokai, and on Hilo, to get other public housing leaders involved and try and form this coalition to bring to the table of the Housing Authority some of our suggestions of the solutions or to the problems that's been happening in the past. And we've reached out to the Housing Authority back then in 97, 98, went to the Board of Commissioners and wanted to meet with them about what's been going on, and to no prevail, nothing has happened.
what kind of problems, Dahlia?
Maintenance, just the buildings were falling apart. A lot of the public housing in Hawaii, we have, I believe, 83 public housing statewide throughout the islands. And there's 11 that's owned by the state, and the rest is funded by the federal government. For Palolo Homes, where I live, it's funded both by the state and the federal government. But if you enter Palolo Homes from the beginning, it's similar. The problems are similar with this federal funding.
I just want to take this opportunity to tell our viewers that we are live on the air, and the number to call, we'd like to hear from you questions and comments. The number to call on Oahu is 956-5670, and on the Big Island is 1-800-342-7949. So we'd love to hear from you. For the rest of the state, you know, Kauai and Molokai, Maui, the show will be rebroadcast on Friday. So for Oahu and the Big Island, if you like, you can call us. We'd love to hear from you. Oahu 956-5670, and the Big Island 1-800-342-7949. So we have some tape, video segments to show about the conditions of housing in Palolo and in other areas where you have tenants on the rise, associations involved there in Nanakuli and Waianae. So we would like to show some of these segments to give people an idea about what's really going on in terms of public housing at this point, and what gave you the impetus to really organize some of the problems that you're talking about. So if the tape is ready, we can roll the tape of Palolo. Yeah. So if you like Dahlia to comment on that.
Okay, this is a shot of the whole housing community, and in this unit we have bad conditions of leaking roofs. You can see the crack across the ceiling, dripping water, and water rust. There's plywood that's been put in the bathrooms that get water rot, and it's just falling apart. They don't replace it or repair it like it should be with the proper material.
Yeah. So this is like Palolo, but it's not just isolated to Palolo. There are the other places as well.
Other.
Yeah, and we have also some video segments about Maili and about Kawi Okalani areas, and also Uluvehi. That's where we shot, and I think the tape is ready now, so we can like comment on this one too as well. So here's a window. What's the significance of this window?
The window for Palolo, we have lead paint. They took a lead paint study. They found lead paint around the window frames, as well as the door. And there's also lead paint outside of the building. And there's been a lot of problems with the situation of the state-owned properties.
How long has this condition been in this fashion? Yeah.
As long as I lived there, I know that for sure.
And nobody did anything to get rid of the lead?
It should have been done 10 years ago. And they're trying to work something out in cleaning up the lead paint. But on the state side of public housing, we have almost 50 vacant units because of the lead paint.
In Palolo.
In Palolo.
In Palolo.
So where 50 more families could be living has been vacant for quite a while.
And there are a lot of homeless people who would benefit from, vacant housing, right?
There's over 10,000 families on the waiting list of public housing, and more. That's part of the Section 8 and the rental subsidy list.
So we have the other tape, I think, is ready to show about the same conditions, the similar kind of conditions in public housing, which actually is a problem, because it seems to me, I think this is Palolo too, right?
This is also Palolo on the federal side. This is one of the federal buildings as you're coming into the housing community, and there's just peeling paint that falls to the ground where children play. They run all over it, and it hasn't been repaired for years.
You know, Dahlia, this is substandard housing, and it's a health hazard. So when you go to the state, what do they tell you? And why aren't they maintaining this regularly?
Well, the answers that we get is that they don't have any money. And I cannot say that. They kind of put also the blame on the residents, I believe, because they don't get enough rent that comes in for these repairs. But for the federal side, where you're seeing the peeling paint from the side of the building, they get full rent for those units because they're subsidized by the federal government.
Yeah, Denise, also you are a housing organizer also, so you have experience with these matters as well. So any comments on this?
Yes, we face the same issues with the project-based Section 8 housing that I've been organizing in for 3 years. And we'll have some pictures later on to show you. Many of these buildings, and they're not owned by state, or the federal, but they're owned by private developers, some of the same developers who was brought into the Chinatown 20 years or so ago. And they do get reserves funding from the federal government, and a lot of their reserves weren't used for the purposes of maintaining the buildings. So that's one of the organizing efforts that we're doing, that people have a right to safe, decent, and affordable housing here in Hawaii.
Yeah, good. So I think the tape for Maili is ready, and the other ones, so we can go ahead and show those kinds of conditions that people are fighting against, it seems to me, and trying to have the state, you know, fix that. It's a shame that, you know, this housing stock, which costs money, and it's taxpayer money, you know, my money, your money, etc., is going to the dogs, so to speak, you know, and there are vacant homes, units in those
properties, that could be occupied by
and
towns
then
that need it.
you know, they're just sitting there. This is like a crime against, you know, our tax dollars, if nothing else, you know.
And this is Maili, one of the properties out on the Waianae coast, and they're planning to renovate. We're not sure how long it's going to take. I know they did part of the housing property on the other side, but still working on.
So that's Maili,
finding the
but
money.
you know, it multiplies in other places.
It multiplies in other places.
Yeah, Kawi Okalani, for instance, we went there for a while, and then the same kind of thing. We can show people, you know, what it is that you know, residents are really upset about and fighting to fix, you know, but with no response from the state to speak of. Yeah, that's at least what the residents were telling us, you know.
Kauiukalani as well as Palolo and other communities went to the media about this.
And the tape is ready at this point, so we can, let's roll,
My name is Sandy Morimoto, and I'm the president of the Resident Association here at Kauiukalani. This is the unit I moved into in 1995, and by 1999, I had noticed termite, some shavings, droppings, looked like sawdust inside the cabinets. And the management unit had sent over someone to check it out and do some shooting into the wall. And instead of shooting into the cabinet, they actually shot into the door jamb. And I don't know if that pesticide was what it was supposed to be or what, but it seemed like it brought the termites up faster and more, and this is what happened to my door jamb, to make it to where the house was really not securable anymore. So I moved to another unit almost a little over a year ago. And it was supposed to be a temporary move, but to date, housing has not done anything about fixing the situation.
Well, there you go. I mean, you know, they've been trying to fix it for a long time. It's not fixed yet. That's a shame.
That's a good example of waste of taxpayers' dollars, because Kauiukalani is just 5 years old, and through the second year that it was built, the residents were already seeing termite-eaten wood in the unit, and brought that to the attention of the housing. And from that time on, it still wasn't. As we speak today, it still hasn't been resolved. While the termites are continuing to eat away, where they lost half of the community there.
So Dahlia, you know, there's the landlord-tenant code, and in private sector, you know, some of this would apply if the housing, you know, needed to be maintained. Does a state landlord-tenant code apply to public housing residents?
No, it does not. Not in public housing.
So they have no avenues to seek remedies?
Except like to beg the state?
Going to the state,
That sounds ridiculous to me,
and going to the media and bringing the stories to the front, and just fighting to get these repairs done. So in the meantime, they're trying to resolve the problem, but it's, you know, it's so slow. This bureaucratic process is so slow working with the state and this government of Hawaii that it just prolongs, and while the buildings are being, you know, deteriorating.
Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity again and remind our viewers that we are broadcasting live on Oahu and the Big Island, and the Oahu number to call, and we'd love to hear from you, is 956-5670, and on the Big Island it's 1-800-342-7949, and the numbers are on your screen as well, but just to reiterate those. I have a question from a viewer, but I want to sit on it for a little bit longer until we watch the other tape, which is on Uluvehi, which is also in Waianae area. And it shows, again, similar situations in Uluvehi. We commented on it. It looks like a barrack or a school and not really public housing, decent one at least. But people are really living in those kind of conditions, and the state is allowing those conditions to happen. So we can roll the tape, if you will.
Okay, this is Uluvehi, also on the Waianae coast. And I believe there's 4 buildings that are completely vacant because of a repair and maintenance that needs to be done. Uluvehi is not under the public housing program, but it's subsidized housing, where affordable housing for families that live out there. And I believe there's maybe 2 buildings that's left, and it's just falling apart. So they're looking of other avenues for a nonprofit or an organization to help take over. And nothing really has happened since Island Tenants has been there for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, these are just, if we go around the island here and go from one project to the another, housing project to another, we have similar situations. I was reading today something about those kinds of situations in an old newspaper clipping, saying that in other areas where you have public housing, you have the same kind of questions. And this is the kind of thing that gives Island Tenants on the Rise impetus to organize and so on, it seems to me, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
like for the units that we living in, or the conditions that we live under, and needed repairs, residents in public housing pay 30% of their income. So you may have a family, 2 working parents, paying $1,200 for a 1-unit bedroom or 2-bedroom. That is way above something that you can find out on the outside, and living in those conditions. So they may be paying more than the market value or the what that unit is actually worth.
Yeah. We have a question, 2 questions here. One is, says like, for me actually, it's addressed to me. Briefly describe the thesis of your paper that was shown on the program a while ago regarding the state policy seems to have created a housing crisis. So, you know, to elaborate on that one. I'm not going to take too much time except to say that, in fact, the state did not really build any housing units, you know, for years and years and years, you know, I mean, affordable housing units. Right. And this is one of the strategic move by the state that people who are, you know, unable to get affordable housing don't have the housing stock to move into. You know, so this is, instead of doing this, the state started developing big ticket projects, you know, similar to, for instance, the convention center, you know, and those big construction projects that bring, you know, jobs and money, but also brings profits to the developers, etc. And, you know, the people would not then benefit from having housing stock, affordable housing stock that they can move to. So this is one example of this, you know. But I don't want to take much time of that. I want to go to another a question by Greg here. And actually, the first question is by Renee. And Greg asks, what kind of rates do these people pay in Palolo? You know, so what kind of rates you folks pay?
Okay, they pay different. There's no cap on the rents in public housing. You just pay 30% of whatever you earn. And it may be from I believe $25 or $50 would be the minimum for someone with no income at all, up to the sky's the limit, because we have families paying over $800 for units because of their income. So whatever you bring in, they're counting that income. If you have children that's at the age of 18, they take 30% of their income, 30% of mom's, 30% of dad's income. So, you know, they're living in public housing according to the income, but to live under these conditions, I don't think it's fair for them. I think they're being robbed, because they can probably find another unit outside and pay less rent, but there's no security on the outside. A lot of families live in public housing because of security. As long as you pay your rent, you always have some place to live, compared to renting on the outside, you know, at any time, like Chinatown evictions that happened in the past, or living under private management, you know, and wanting to sell out. You know, there's no security of long-term homes.
So now you folks are organizing, right? And you have been having successes. Like you have how many tenants association in the umbrella organization Tenants on the Rise? How many?
So I believe 24, and that's
24,
including Section 8 organizations too.
But there are what, 80 some kind of
There's 83
housing projects, right?
projects, and they've listed 37 that has been that had associations, but there's very few that's been active, and that's the purpose of Island Tenants, getting into communities, helping them organize, support their association. And they never had that kind of support. There's no way for public housing residents to get involved or to have an independent voice. And a lot of that's why Island Tenants became, you know, to form this independent voice of residents. And when you say the word independence, the government might, or managers, or whoever it is you're dealing with, they automatically view independence as confrontational, radical, and that's not the purpose of why residents organize. They just want a better
Just want a
place to
decent
live.
place to live. That's all
Exactly.
they're asking for.
And you think in a democratic society, so to speak, you know, the bureaucrats would encourage independence and
Right.
democracy and the people's voice to be
Right.
heard. But apparently the bureaucrats are against the Democrats, which are the people in this instance. you
And
know.
why should we be paying that type of rent for units with lead paint in it?
Substandard.
You know,
That's right.
substandard, and you don't have the maintenance or the repairman going into the units to renovate it because of their health and safety, but yet residents continue to live in that situation, you know, in that kind of conditions for years.
We have a clip that I'd like to show of testimony that you were giving in support of Tenants on the Rise, being the advisory body to the Department of Housing Corporation. So I'd like to show this to our viewers, and I'd like to have your comment on what happened after that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So if the tape is ready, we can roll it.
And we're just, Island Tenants on the Rise is here this morning to protest this recognition of this newly formed board, where we have also items of island, people of Island Tenants on the Rise members on this list that has not been informed of this morning's meeting. And a lot of the resident advisory board members on this list were not called to be part of this recognition this morning. So I just wanted to make it clear to everyone here and the Board of Commissioners, directors, that Island Tenants is here. We took a democratic election on July 29th, and where 22 associations were present, that Island Tenants on the Rise came out to be elected as the Resident Advisory Board, and I believe this morning is to turn over that decision by the resident leaders of 22 different communities, compared to the, I'm not sure if it was a vote on September 30th, where there were only, I think, approximately 8 associations present, and that's the RAD that they would like to recognize today. We're not in agreement with that.
It's an interesting thing that, you know, what is it, DHCD?
Well, the fight continues, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And HDCH, they gave us the ability to come together, decide where 22 associations from 22 different public housings were there, and decided that Island Tenants on the Rise would be the resident advisory board in making decisions. We're the only statewide organization that meets on a regular basis, get consensus from the other communities and the leaders, and bring everything to the front of what's happening in public housing. But they refuse to recognize Island Tenants on the Rise. Instead, they formed this corporation group of their own. We call it their hand-picked resident representatives to form this resident advisory board, so-called, supposed to be helping and focus on the 5-year plan of public housing.
Yeah. That's maybe we can go to see what's happening with the Section 8 also, and ask Denise. You're an organizer, of course, and also you were at a conference in Denver, actually with Dahlia as well. So could you tell us something about the kind of organizing you do and the kinds of problems you have, and maybe a little bit about the conference?
Well, I'd like to start by addressing that I seem to feel that we're piggybacking on some of the Chinatown experiences. We started organizing in 1998 through Affordable Housing and Homeless Alliance. The initial buildings that we're organizing in were some of the buildings that were developed 20 years ago with private developers. And these are Section 8, project-based Section 8 buildings, federally subsidized units. After 20 years, the developers no longer have an obligation to the federal government. And we had over, I believe, 32 buildings in Hawaii that were at risk. When Hawaii jumped on top of the bandwagon of organizing Section 8 properties, there was already over 100,000 units nationally that were lost due to the opt-out of project-based Section 8 buildings in Hawaii. So we started there in 1998 through Affordable Housing and Homeless Alliance, and one of the first buildings that I entered was in Chinatown area.
Very good.
So it's nice to see
You're carrying on the tradition, and I'm glad to see you on board. You're carrying on a good tradition.
It was Mauna Kea Towers in Chinatown, which you have some photos of to see. There was quite some challenges there. This is a building that was built 20 years ago, as I said, in a very now upscale neighborhood. It was developed and designed to be, I believe that their initial intentions were one day to be Mauna Kea Palms condominium. Even though the folks there, they fought for that to be affordable housing, low-income housing. But I believe the developers had ideas of one day turning it into a condominium after they received the support of the federal government for 20-some odd years. Along with the federal subsidized units, they get a lot of money to preserve these buildings and upkeep these buildings, and not all the buildings are in the conditions that we would consider safe and decent affordable housing. They're some of these buildings are very substandard, yet they're receiving a lot of our tax dollars to keep them standard.
Yeah, I have some photos here that you supplied, so you might want to comment on them as I show them on the Elmo, actually. So I'll take this one out here. Start doing the photos on the Elmo here. So, are we ready there? Okay, on the photo. Okay. Yeah, there we are. It's like high technology, yeah? Okay.
This is some of the work that we're doing at Affordable Housing is we're organizing in the buildings, and we're organizing tenant groups. We have meetings and tenant groups and building associations, so the people in the building can watch after their own community and the efforts.
So these are some of the conditions at those buildings?
Yes, these are definitely some of the substandard conditions of the buildings who received a lot of tax dollars and federal.
Which one is this, Denise? I'm sorry. Which buildings?
Which one is this? This is, I believe.
This one is on Hilo and it's
Riverside.
the Riverside Apartments.
The Riverside
How old is it?
Apartment. It's approximately 20 years.
Oh, it's terrible.
Okay, so these are terrible conditions. So it's across the state, not only on Oahu.
Oh, no. Across.
So many times, too often, we hear that this is tenant abuse or tenant vandalism.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is wood rot, termite wood rot,
Yeah,
weather
yeah,
rot,
right.
wear and tear.
Wear and tear.
Just normal wear and tear.
Right. And then here is another one. It's a nice one. How come it's nice?
Okay, this is a reflection of some of the work that the residents have done, like at Mauna Kea Tower Apartments.
Oh, they did it themselves, despite the state and
No, no,
federal-
no, I don't think so. They can't.
Yeah.
Through their organizing
Okay.
efforts.
Okay. Through
They-
organizing, they forced the state
the
or
for-
compelled the state to do
Right.
Correct.
things. Yeah.
And the federal government to
Yes.
enforce renovations in their buildings so they can have decent and safe,
Excellent.
affordable
And
housing.
here we have
And,
a group of Chinatown residents, right?
Tenant committee, great.
And they fighting in their self-defense, right?
This group,
And-
they started fighting in 1998 to preserve their building. Their building was up for sale in Chinatown.
Mhm.
Their 20-year contract had ended with the federal government, and there was no guarantee that the owner was going to reassign with the project-based Section 8. So some of the struggles were, of course, for me, was the language barrier.
Yeah.
And as you see, there's many different cultures, and the variety of cultures that we're facing. We're facing with the elderly and the handicapped, and there's language barriers, and there's a strong diversity of ethnic groups in these
Yeah.
project-based housing.
Yeah. So the idea is to save our home, right?
To preserve our
Yeah.
affordable stock of
Sure,
housing in
yeah.
Hawaii.
And not to let it deteriorate.
That's right.
This photo right here was taken with a group of tenants that accompanied us to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and here I have a picture from there. So could you tell us, please, a little bit about
Yeah.
that picture and perhaps your experience in there?
Okay. Every year, for the past 3 years, we've been fundraising the federal government subsidized funds so we can take the residents that live in project-based Section 8 to Washington, D.C., and we educate them on how to lobby and organize to preserve the federal laws to preserve housing in Hawaii.
Yeah, I have here photos as well. What's the significance of these ones, you know, as you were...
I'll give that to Dahlia.
Yeah. Oh, Dahlia
explain
is in
this.
there, yeah.
This
This
This was in-
is at the conference in Denver,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Is it Denver or Washington, this one?
this was in Washington.
Washington. Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. This was in Washington, and this picture, is that my right-hand side or my left? Okay, the taller gentleman is Dushan Hockett, and he's part of the National Organization for Public Housing Residents, Center for Community Change. On the other side is Cleo Bugsby, and Cleo is a resident of Section 8 project-based a community, and was elected president on the national level. And at this conference, the both bridged together on a fight for the income verification that the government was going to send letters out to all residents in this project-based Section 8 as well as public housing, and checking if they paid the rent that they should be paying, and they wanted to get some kind of retroactive monies back.
So we have this nice photo I want to show also that sums it up. So we were talking about it,
Yeah.
Denise, before, so you might want
And
to
it
say
pretty much
something about
tops
that.
it all.
Yeah, it's
This,
United We Stand, that's a slogan that actually Mr. Cleo Bugsby created in Ohio, and he will be out here on April 20th as a keynote speaker for a leadership conference that we are facilitating through affordable housing. And this represents this housing issue is not a singular issue. It's not just a federal government issue or a state issue. As the public housing residents and the Section 8 residents have band together to stand together on this issue, we all need to do that, all the communities.
yeah.
This is just not a isolated issue here.
Yeah, it's like that's what in unity there is strength,
In
and that's the
unity.
only kind of organizing. We
Most
have
definitely.
a few minutes left, and we also we have a few more questions. But the other thing that we have is I want to show another segment, video segment, which is about 1 minute. And what it does, it shows the connection between the Native Hawaiian struggle and the struggle for housing in general. As you said, united we stand, divided we are homeless. And if the tape is ready, then we can roll that, and then maybe some comments, and we'll go from there. Okay, we're ready.
First of all, we moved out of our house about 3 years ago, because from 400 they raised the rent to 1,000. You know, we went to stay at different places, different parks, but everywhere they kept kicking us off. So we moved here, and it's been real good here. We just have to fight the wind and the rain all the time. And when we first moved here, for the first few months, every time we'd come home, want to cry because our tent was down and all our things were all wet. I mean, washing clothes by hand is real hard, you know. And every time you wash and then it rains and then it's wet again, and oh my God. But then, you know, I think what don't kill you makes you stronger. In the summertime, it's real good. You know, when someone catches fish, we all share. But the best fish we eat is
Well, you know, I mean, the reason people in Makua were living on the beach is because, as the lady was saying, is that the rents were raised from 400 to 1,000, so you couldn't afford it any longer, and not that because they love the beach and so forth, you know, the conditions are bad there. So this calls for more organizing and so forth, and I'm wondering, you know, like you've been to conferences before and so on, but do you see that the usefulness for some conference, an organizing conference of tenants and people who are really interested in housing issues, to come about and figure out strategies for organizing tenants island-wide and statewide, and even like connecting with other tenant activists on the continental United States as well. What kind of ideas do you have about such a conference, perhaps? Denise, would you?
I definitely see a need for that. One of the reasons we're involved here is because of a national organization who, you know, took Hawaii under their umbrella, and that gave us the opportunity to organize here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And through our affiliation with this, the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, we have come with a lot of good solutions and win-win solutions that we could utilize here in Hawaii. I think that there's a strong need.
Okay, great. So on this note, we shall end, and we still have a lot of questions. Sorry we couldn't get to them all. The time is short. But thank you very much for joining us, and thank our guests for their beautiful and very nice discussion on issues such as the tenants issue and the housing issues, which are very important issues for Hawaii. So thank you very much again, and we see you next time in April, second Tuesday in April, where we have our show on labor, and it would be a timely issue on labor, public employees and private employees. Thank you very much.